Hi, everyone. My name is Tsvetelina. I'm the executive director of the 18th Annual Damn Short Film Festival, and you are joining us today to chat with our filmmakers from the Documentary A and B programs. Welcome, filmmakers. Thank you for joining us. And we're just going to go around and have everybody introduce themselves and tell us their film and what their role was in the project. And we'll start with Samantha.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My film is a short documentary on a community in central Brooklyn's response to the coronavirus pandemic. And I was the director, producer, cinematographer, and editor. It was a one-woman endeavor. And yeah, thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much. Joe, how about you?
Yeah, my name is Joe. I'm the director of a short film called Hello Sunshine, which is about a crisis responder and gun violence survivor in North Philadelphia. And thanks also for having me. I'm also a one-person band or one or two people band, so I guess there's a lot of that going around.
Thank you. Carl, how about you?
Yes, hi there. Thanks so much for having me. Great to meet everybody. I'm Carl Hansen, a co-director and co-producer of Second Act Danny J. Gomez, which is a documentary that we made as part of the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge that has us use people with disabilities either in front of or behind the camera. And I will also say that our crew, our editor, and our composer were also disabled. And so I'm really excited to be able to share this film with everybody.
Thank you so much. And we have Patrick. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your project.
Hi, yes, I'm Patrick Revere, and my film is Just a Broadway Baby, Mary Ellen Ashley. And it is about the career and life of Mary Ellen, who is currently 85 years old and still doing her thing. And I'm a first-time filmmaker, so I was really grateful to do this. I'm the director and producer, although I will say honestly that it is Mary Ellen's story and our editor, Laird Ogden, who I credit with this film. So thanks.
That's awesome. Let's go around and talk about what the inspiration behind this, why you chose this story to tell. We'll start with Samantha.
Hi. Yeah, so my film was I'm a first-time filmmaker as well, Patrick. My background previous to this was in brand content for tech companies. And during COVID, I actually went to graduate school at the New School for documentary media studies. And this was my thesis film there. And when I got to New York City, was really interested in what had been happening on the ground during COVID, because as we all, I'm sure, remember, New York City was one of the hardest hit areas around the world, not just the country, at the start of the pandemic. And certain communities, especially immigrant and underserved communities, were being hit especially hard. And I got to New York City about 6 months after that. And by then, a lot of the media coverage around those communities had waned and not been getting a lot of attention. And I was involved. I was from San Francisco originally and involved with a nonprofit called Refugee and Immigrant Transitions beforehand. And so when I got to New York, I wanted to see similar organizations that get involved. And through this, I found this organization, People in Need, which is in central Brooklyn in the Ditmas Park area, primarily a South Asian community. And there's a woman there who has a nonprofit. And I started volunteering there and got to know her and was just immediately drawn to not only her work, but also who she is as a person. And they originally pre-COVID service domestic violence survivors and young families in the area. And they run a local restaurant. And during COVID, one of the biggest problems that her community was facing was simply food, and just people weren't able to buy food. And a lot of these community members weren't eligible for government services to get food. And so she and her both restaurant and nonprofit kind of pivoted all of their time and resources to providing food for the community and doing food distribution. So I filmed and did the food distribution for about 6 months with her. Like Patrick was saying about your character, like this was like, it's her story. Like she is really remarkable, and I really give the credit to her. And I'm like really grateful that she allowed me to showcase that.
That's awesome. Joe, how about you?
So My background is largely in still photography, and I'm also a gun violence prevention activist. And I've been working for about 7 years on a project about the impact of gun violence on survivors and the family members of victims and witnesses to these things, and traveled all over the country doing that, from North Philadelphia to Native American reservation in rural Oklahoma, just anywhere and everywhere, because it's a problem that cuts through the whole country. I was photographing this woman in Philadelphia as part of the project, and the more we spoke, the more I realized just how layered her story was. And I mean, all these stories of these survivors they're all amazing. They're all awful, and there's no hierarchy in that. That being said, the history of gun violence trauma and domestic violence trauma that this woman has had, and how she's channeled it into service, helping people who are in active opioid addiction and people whose families have unsolved murder cases. I knew that it went beyond a still photograph. That if there's ever somebody, I'm sure you guys feel the same way about the people in your films, whose story deserves to be brought to life in film, it's this woman. So yeah, I mean, so we've filmed for a lot. We filmed, for a long time. She does an annual camp out to raise awareness for, again, unsolved murder cases. Travels the streets of Philadelphia, showing people how to reverse overdoses. So we covered a lot of ground and kept it positive, kept it showing the people who she serves with humanity and dignity, because all too often this community has really been victimized by the media and by journalists and photographers and other documentary filmmakers. So didn't want to fall into that trap of just showing the worst of the worst to draw out the drama, but rather show just compassion and caring and survival in some respects for everybody who's in the film.
That's awesome. And that her calling everyone sunshine, I mean, that makes you just feel so, I don't know, it's just very very touching and makes everybody feel good. So
that's actually how she refers to the people who she serves. They're these rays of sunshine. And when you watch the film, it's been a long time since someone, I imagine, has looked at these people with that amount of love and dignity. So that's where that came from.
Yeah, that's beautiful. She's wonderful. So thank you for sharing her story. Carl, how about for you?
Yeah, so Danny Gomez, who's the subject of this documentary, we met through the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge in previous years. And in fact, the film, we kind of made it a little self-reflexive about that experience for him, because Danny had a life-altering accident in 2016. And when that happened, his entire life changed. But before that, he was from Louisiana. He had survived Hurricane Katrina and moved out to Los Angeles to pursue this dream of becoming a Hollywood actor, but wasn't realizing that dream at that point. So in the film, we kind of explore that. But part of the thing with the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge is you only have 5 days to do it, right? So the other thing we had to deal with, especially for this particular film, was everybody was remote. It was for the year 2020, and everybody was remote. So we needed to figure out how to actually make the film that we wanted to make and tell Danny's story. So not dissimilar to what we're doing today, right? I mean, we're in this virtual session. That's what we did. Like one night on a Tuesday night when the competition started, after he got off of work, we were on a Zoom for like 3 hours where I recorded the session. And I'm like, we'll just have to find the story out of this conversation. And there's so much stuff that was left out. But his life, I mean, similar to what all of you were saying, just needed to be shown, needed to be told. And Danny's just such an amazing person, and he co-produced and co-directed with me as well, because this is his story. It's very, very personal to him, and he's very, very interested in getting it out there. So the challenge of making the film in the amount of time that we had, the biggest part was finding what the story was out of that 3-hour conversation, because we knew kind of how we wanted to do it and make it in a way that didn't look like it was a Zoom call, right? I mean, like, I think we're kind of tired of what that looks like, and I knew everything else was going to kind of look like that. So how do we make it not look like a Zoom call? And we figured out this like animation filter that we could put on it, and our editor Matthew Placenci, who got nominated in the competition for Best Editor, really worked diligently to figure out the real look for it, and it came out looking really awesome. I think unless you didn't know that, right? Unless I told you, I don't think people would know that it was not real animation, because it really does look incredible.
Yeah, it really adds something to it when when it starts out and you're so yeah, that was a great call doing that. Patrick, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the entertainment industry my whole life since I was a kid, but I was always on the acting side of things, and then it shifted to arts administration and arts education as I moved into adulthood, and continued to act as well. And that's how I met Mary Ellen. We were in the world premiere of an off-Broadway play about 12 years ago together, and she played my mother. And we had to rehearse together outside of rehearsals because, she was having problems with her lines. So I would get together with her in a more personal way than you might if you were just rehearsing in a theater space with everybody. And as I got to know her and started to hear her stories, it's just so much of her life was so fascinating. And she started out as, a young child very early on when World War II was happening, and was performing at Madison Square Garden for the war relief, and then got discovered and had her first Broadway show at 4 years old in The Innocent Voyage. And then, went on to do the original production of Annie Get Your Gun with Merman, and stayed with the show the whole time, growing up with the show and playing multiple roles. But, initially this film was going to be a much larger project. Throughout my life in the entertainment industry, I've worked with a lot of strong, powerful, and empowering women. And I often feel that their stories aren't told as much as men's stories are, particularly in the entertainment industry. And particularly those that are sort of rank and file. They're not the big stars that you've heard of, like I mentioned, Merman. So people wouldn't know who Mary Ellen was, and yet her career has spanned 80 years, and she's rehearsing another play right now. And she's also had a family, and she's gone through a lot. And so initially this was going to be a story about different Broadway women, and not just actresses, but women designers and directors and musicians who've played instruments in Broadway orchestras for 20 years. But as a first-time filmmaker, there were a lot of things I didn't know or understand. Again, I've been the actor for so long, but all of these other things I was sort of learning on the fly. And at the end of the day, we had so many roadblocks that the only thing we ended up with was footage from Mary Ellen. And at first I thought there wasn't really a film there. And it was just sort of going to be, This Is Your Life, Mary Ellen, to be able to present to her as sort of an homage and hope to give her some joy. And then my editor sort of worked miracles, and he did incredible work with research and archival materials, and put together something that I thought, other people would enjoy seeing, and that her story deserved to be told, and people needed to, because it's really a story about hope, and about one of her favorite phrases is onward. She never lets things get her down. She just broke her toe recently. Again, she's 85 and she's still in rehearsal. She keeps going. And so it's that sort of spirit and drive that we keep going, and we stay positive. And part of what she loves to do is bring joy to others through her art.
That's so wonderful. And just to our festival, obviously we only do short films, but especially the documentary category is always just incredible, because you end up seeing just so many inspiring stories, and you learn so much in a short amount of time. And so one of my favorite genres in our festival. And so let's talk a little bit more about documentaries in general. Are you strictly thinking of, as far as future projects, is documentary your medium that you want to focus on? And just speak a little bit about documentaries in general. Let's start with Samantha.
Yeah, I think that for me, the area that I'm most interested in is a documentary. And I think that I haven't worked in narrative or fiction world before. But from what I've learned from friends and advisors, there's so much crossover and to learn from both, especially because the story should be the core component of both of those mediums. But for me, I want to spend my career in documentary film and nonfiction work, and both directing and producing. So yeah, that's the hope for me.
That's awesome. Joe, what are your thoughts on documentaries?
It's a good question, because I never really thought much about. I mean, we all, I'm sure, always have ideas kicking around about, oh, wouldn't it be cool to do this, and this would be great, and this would be funny, or this would be interesting. But it's on a pile of good intention, in my on my desk. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm just really into learning about people and seeing the amazing things that they'll give you if they trust you, and that you're talking to somebody, or you're next to somebody online, and you have the subway or whatever, and you have no idea the story that they're carrying, but then you learn a little bit about them, and they begin to trust you, and just the gifts that they'll give you are pretty amazing. When that happens, it's pretty amazing. So I don't think I'm going to get tired of that anytime soon, because there's a certain, just a certain magic in kind of how that unfolds, which sure, it can be written, but it's not the same as asking somebody a question for the. I'm sure everyone else can kind of relate to this, right? Like, the first time you tell someone a story is always the best time you tell someone a story, right? So it's someone tells you this, and your head starts to spin, and you go in a million different directions, and because you're curious and you're excited, and that's sort of where the that's where the really interesting part happens for me.
That's awesome. And we're seeing some comments from our audience. Please send us a question if you have one for our filmmakers. And just, right now, especially through the pandemic, it's just such a great way to connect with everyone, especially watching these documentaries. You feel, that connection with these people and these subjects. And Carl, same question to you.
Yeah, so my job, like my day job, is I'm the head of production at Fox Sports Original Programming. So documentaries are something that I do for my livelihood as well, but that's sort of on the production side. I don't really engage too much with the creative as much as I like to, which is why I make films on the side, and especially as part of these weekend film competitions, because I have a 8-year-old son and a wife, and family obligations in addition to a job, so I can actually make do my craft in these short, compressed time frames. But I think documentary is just such an amazing genre of storytelling. I love doing narrative as well. I've made a lot of different kinds of films, a lot of different genres, but documentary is when you can say it's real, when it's actually happening, and it's not a Marvel movie with like a superhero running around where it's the end of the world all the time. I feel like you can get much more intimate with people, and I think especially with the audience too, if you really can delve into a subject that perhaps they don't know much about. If it's a little known, a little known person or event or something that you can explore that hasn't been told before. That I think is really the most exciting part about documentary.
Definitely. Patrick, how about for you?
Yeah, for me, I really started falling in love with documentary films about 20 years ago when I started going to film festivals. I hadn't really gone to film festivals before. As an actor, I was in films, but they were always scripted. They were narrative. And so when I started discovering documentaries in film festivals, I loved the unique stories. I loved that so many universal themes came from documentaries. And yet, even if it was a story that you thought, oh, maybe I've heard a similar story, it was never the same story twice, because, everyone's an individual and they all have their own, story to tell. So, for me, I love documentary films. I sort of, fell into this because of the theater, and I'm almost embarrassed to call myself a filmmaker because I'm with, some incredible filmmakers, particularly in this festival, and so grateful to be a part of it. But now being on the other side of the camera, it really is a lot about listening in documentary. You're listening to the person that you're, talking to, and listening to their story, and then presenting that story in the best way you can so other people can learn about them, learn with them, laugh with them, cry with them, whatever it is. So there's a lot of emotions within documentaries, I think. And I do have a couple things percolating, but I think, as Joe said, I have like 50 plays that I've written that still are not finished. They're parts of plays, and I've had some plays, produced and everything else, but that's a sort of a very different world. But in terms of this, I do have some ideas. And if I was going to make another film, it would be another documentary.
That's awesome. Let's see. We are accepting questions from the audience, but until we have some questions from them, I would like to know what your advice is to aspiring documentary filmmakers. And we'll start with Samantha.
That's a good question. I mean, there's millions of pieces of advice. I think that kind of, a lot to what the group had been saying about why documentary as a medium is so special is just the ability to, or the opportunity to share someone else's story is like such a profound responsibility. And I think doing that with care and empathy is the most important thing that a documentary filmmaker can do. And so I think before you start something, being really clear about why you want to tell that story and being transparent about that with your protagonists. I also think a good habit is not like referring to necessarily the protagonist of your film as like a subject, but more so as a collaborator is another like mental lens to think through. And then it also, I think, gives them the due respect that they deserve for them entrusting you with their story. So I think those are some things that come to mind. Then also, I think that it can be really intimidating just getting started. And so just starting at all is, I think, my biggest piece of advice is like, there are so many amazing stories out there, and a lot of great emerging filmmakers that can be the ones that tell them. And so just like starting and sharing your ideas with your friends and loved ones. And I think, and then one more piece of advice would be just to continue to get feedback. It's like, once you're making a film, you're so in your head about the whole time. Like, you're thinking about new scenes while you're on a bike ride, while you're walking, how you can make something better, like a question that you should have asked. And I think just sharing what you've done and continuing to iterate on it from others' pieces of feedback is like crucial, because even though I said I'm a one-woman endeavor, I had my partner, my brother, my advisor looking at my film cuts all the time, and their advice was imperative to like what the film became. So yeah, those are just a few, but just go out and make something.
That's all. Those are all great pieces of advice. Joe, what would you say?
I had a couple of thoughts. I forgot one of them, but maybe it'll come back to me. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I try to remind myself and talk to other people that like time is your friend. Time is your friend. That it just takes, for me at least, it just takes time, and there's a big investment in getting people to trust you and to open up with you and to feel safe around you and to know that you're going to that you're going to cradle their story and that you're going to really handle it delicately. And there's no shortcuts to that. It just takes time. And similarly, just from a logistical standpoint, like, you're going to shoot a lot of stuff that's going to suck. It's just going to be really, like, you're not going to be able to, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be what you want. So you have to go back and do it again, or you try different things. I mean, sure, we all have hard drives full of footage that no one's ever going to see, because it wasn't right, or as much as you wanted it to be right, it really wasn't right. So you got to resist the temptation to say, it's close enough, it's okay. No, I have to go down and do that interview again because I didn't like it, or it didn't get to the meat of what we wanted to talk about, or any number of reasons why things just need to be slowed down. Yeah, it just takes time, and it's so worth it though, because you can tell the difference. I think you can tell the difference between when someone really took it slow and took their time to do it right, and to build this collaboration, because I think it really is a collaboration between everybody, and for people to want to share. People are really smart, and they know, especially if you're dealing with different kinds of population. In the case of my film, they know when you're coming into a situation with an agenda, a predetermined point of view, whatever it is, and they can smell that a mile away. So it takes a while to break down that wall and let them see you for what your intentions really are. So that would be my advice. Just like it's a necessary part of it, even though you might not feel like you're doing anything, because in terms of actual like movie making, you are doing something by just putting in the requisite amount of upfront time.
That's right. Carl, what advice would you offer?
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of what Joe just said, being authentic, right, as a filmmaker and as a storyteller is really important. And when you make something, whatever it is, if it's scripted or documentary, you're putting yourself into it. You're putting your time, like you were saying, Joe, it takes time. Like you're putting yourself into these projects, right? So you need to go in open as well. If you're expecting someone else to open up to you, you need to be open with them as well. And I think it can become very easy as filmmakers and documentarians sometimes to put that camera up and create a bit of a distance that may not help the process, right? It's like, how do you really connect with your subject? And maybe that's going out to dinner. Maybe it's actually spending time off camera sometimes with people, right? So it's them getting a chance to know you. I think one of the other things too, and when I started, my filmmaking journey, I was still shooting on actual film. I mean, there was still digital that we were emerging with at that point, but I was shooting on actual film. So we had to make very difficult decisions because film stock was expensive. You had to process it all, and then you had a finite amount of it, and you had to like cut it up. And it was a much different journey than it is today, when everybody has a storytelling device in their pocket, and the barrier of entry is so much lower. You don't have to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on equipment. That iPhone shoots in 4K, and most everything is okay in 4K, right? I mean, it looks really good. So don't let the technology or the lack of understanding of equipment prevent you from actually making something. You can practice on your phone. I do stuff all the time on my phone and edit it on my phone. And then you can upload it to YouTube directly from your phone, right? It's like you don't need all the bells and whistles anymore, Jimmy, that you once did. And all those bells and whistles now are much less expensive than they once were too. So the tools really have kind of been opened up to filmmakers to not have to spend a whole lot of money in order to achieve the goal. Like, go out and shoot something. If there's a subject that you're interested in, go out and shoot it. And again, Joe, like you were saying, right? It's like, you may not like it in the end, but if you don't try, you'll never actually succeed, right? You'll never actually learn the craft or get better at the craft and figure out, oh, I can, here's my style. Here's how I kind of figure that out. But you have to try to do it. The failure is in not trying, right? Because otherwise, if you're trying and not getting the achieved goal, you just go on to the next thing and learn from that. So it's all part of sort of a stepping stone process as you build your storytelling career, because it is a craft, right? It's something that's like, woodworkers don't just immediately go whoop, 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 and are able to like carve something, right? Or make a table or anything, right? If you think of any artists, filmmaking is the same way, and especially documentary filmmaking is the same way. Watch documentaries, watch as many documentaries as you can if there's something that you're interested in, and find something that's like, oh, I love the style of that. That's verite, fly on the wall filmmaking. That's exactly the kind of way I want to do it. Not Michael Moore, where he's in your face all the time, but maybe that, you respond to that as well. So you just kind of find what you like from seeing the stuff, like at festivals, like Damn Short. It gives you that opportunity to kind of see what you like and what you don't like, and find that for yourself.
Very true. Pat, what's your advice?
Well, it's hard to follow up all that genius from those three, but and I piggyback on everything they've said. As a first-time filmmaker, I would say one of the biggest things for me was it's a large learning curve. And so if you haven't done it before, and so you have to allow yourself to sort of make mistakes, make errors, and not beat yourself up and keep moving forward. And so that was something for me. I mean, it took me 5 years to get this short documentary of 23 minutes to final cut. And so, it's not going to be something you can do in a week. So it's something that, it'll be a time commitment. But as I think Joe said, it's obviously worth it in the end. When you have, this beautiful creation. I mean, it's a piece of art that you're presenting to the world. The other thing I would really say to anyone who's just starting out is that be passionate about what you want to work on. So just as much as you want to hear from this person telling their story and you want them to be passionate about their story, you should be passionate about wanting to let their story happen and get their story on film, because there's a lot of things out there, and I'm sure you think, oh, well, if I do this, maybe I'll get to this plateau, or maybe HBO will want to. You shouldn't do it for those reasons. You should do it because you really love the subject, you love the material that you're working on. The other thing that's true that Carl said is there aren't the boundaries that there used to be. So if you feel like, well, I don't have thousands of dollars to buy these big, huge Nikon or these big name cameras, but I have my iPhone, well, then you can start there. I mean, you can do things there. And there are incredible films being made on iPhones and other smaller equipment. So you don't necessarily have to have, tons of backing. And the final thing I would just say is, it's always going to be a collaboration. So even if you're sort of doing this on your own and it's you and just the story you want to tell, there's always other people involved. I happen to have an editor. Some people edit themselves, but I also showed the rough cut of this film to several incredible women that I respected because it was a woman's story and I wanted to hear their feedback before I, set it out on the world. And initially, again, just giving it as a gift to Mary Ellen, I wanted to make sure I wanted to hear other people's thoughts about it. So that's the other thing I would say is allow yourself to get feedback from others. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. We have a question from the audience. But I keep having Samantha go first. So this time I will have Carl go first.
Okay. So the question you see on the screen is, filmmakers, how do you practice self-care from seeing things that are hard to see? So I was a supervising producer on a show called Boston Med, which was an ABC News documentary series about hospitals in Boston, because that's where I'm from originally. I live in LA now, but I got to live in Boston for 4 months and go, through these journeys with actual patients, actual doctors, through various surgeries and things. And so I saw some stuff that I will never unsee. And it was really incredibly difficult. There were patients and people who I befriended who ended up passing away, and a lot of stuff that occurred just in a very short 4-month period. That's very traumatic. And I still probably have some PTSD from that experience. So in terms of like self-care, it's talking about it for me, being able to say like, I witnessed, and this is no joke, I witnessed a face transplant from someone who I'd convinced to be on the show, and he ended up passing away, and then they transplanted his face onto somebody else's face. And it's like, I can't make that stuff up, right? And it's sort of like this thing that's very rare and strange and incredible and traumatic. And I mean, it has all of these feelings built into it. And yet it was part of my job, right? So I was required to be there to be a part of that. So I think the other thing too is therapy. I would highly recommend therapy. It's really good. I've really enjoyed it. It really helps get some of those feelings out. And then getting rest and proper nutrition and exercise and all the kind of normal things we as human beings need, that are good, that I may not be the best at, but I need to get better. But those are, I think, the kinds of things that, especially coming out of an experience like that, that helped me. So, I think that's a very extreme case, maybe. I mean, seeing that amount of stuff in a very short amount of time may not be the norm for most, filmmakers. I can say with the team that I worked with, like, that was there every day, and I really respect everything that those guys do. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of the best thing that I can say about something difficult, right?
Wow, that's crazy to have experienced that. Joe, we'll go with you next. I think, are you muted? Or am I muted?
Yeah, I think I might be the wrong person to ask this question to, because I don't do it well. I'll be honest. I don't do it well. And I think that it's sort of yeah. I mean, having the things that you see, or having things that I see and experience, consume me to some extent. As difficult as it can be sometimes, I also think that that breeds empathy, and that it would be hard to do what I do if I didn't have empathy. I kind of, so I guess there's like ideally there'd be like a little sweet spot, right? Where it's not so intense that I can't do the work, but it's intense enough that I can really dive in and be empathetic versus being like a distant observer. So I've not found that balance yet. I'd love to say that I know plenty of photographers and filmmakers who they have rituals. They go every night, no matter what. They go out for a walk, or they play with their dog, or they do whatever, and more power to them. But I think I don't do it well. And I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of work like crazy until it gets to be too much, take time off, and then work like crazy again. So
Unfortunately, I can relate.
I would not put that in the advice. I wouldn't piggyback that on the last advice question, but we do the best we can.
Well, this question was important for both of us to hear everybody's take on. So, Patrick, what is your advice on this?
So this is a difficult one for me, just because in the one film that I've made, there wasn't really much hard to see. It was such a beautiful story, and it's so uplifting throughout. I didn't have that in terms of this woman and her story, but I can just say that in general, when I'm dealing with things that are difficult, meditation is a part of my practice. I'm also very fortunate that I live at the very tip of Cape Cod, where I can just go for a walk on the beach. And so I think even if you don't have the beach to walk to, if there's some place where you can put like your headphones on, or your iPod on, or whatever it is, and just go for a walk somewhere and sort of get your own center away from all the noise and the the visions that you're seeing, and try to get let yourself just get a fresh perspective. And particularly if you're telling stories that are difficult, that are traumatic, that are dealing with very serious subject matter, just keep reminding yourself that that the story you're helping to tell needs to be told, and it needs to get out there, and other people need to see it. And so the essence of that can keep you going, because as difficult as it is to see it, to film it, to share it, as the filmmaker yourself, that it's important that you get that story out.
Definitely. Samantha.
Yeah, I think that in my case, I think kind of similar to the advice I gave before, the last piece of advice is having trusted people in your corner, even if they're not directly involved in the film process, to be able to not only share the footage with and your ideas with, but also just your experience in general. I think so. I think having loved ones to speak to and bounce ideas off of is good. And I think that everyone kind of has alluded to this, but everyone has their own models of self care. And I think that in filmmaking, you can bring those self care that you take that maybe aren't part of your filmmaking practice into your filmmaking practice. So, like meditation or therapy or going on walks or these rituals, like Joe said that some filmmakers have. I think just trying to find balance between things. I think also taking a step away can always be good. So it is a long process making a film, and trying to take breaks is really good. Yeah, so those would be some of my thoughts.
I would also remind everybody to eat. Please eat. Like, you kind of get stuck in projects and you know you don't eat. Remember to eat.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dad's coming. My dad nature is coming out.
So we're still accepting questions from the audience. So type in a question if you have one. But I had a question and it escaped me. Do you guys have any questions for each other?
I just wondered if the other filmmakers, if this is the first festival that this specific film has been in for them.
We'll start with Joe. How about you go first?
No, we've been very fortunate in that we've been in quite a few, both here and in the UK. Working with a wonderful woman named Rebecca, who's a film festival consultant who has helped position the film and package the film and talk about the film in a great way to get the attention of different festival directors. So, yeah, we've been lucky in that we're getting a lot of eyeballs on it, which is what we all want to do, right? Is get these stories out into the world, and yeah, we know with the hope that it'll have impact on people. But yeah, no, it's been good making the rounds of the festival circuit, and unfortunately these days, fortunately and unfortunately, I guess, we're dealing with virtual festivals, we're dealing with hybrid festivals. Certainly nothing like seeing it in a theater on a big screen. That's been awesome. It actually showed in a drive-in movie theater in Oregon last week, I think, which I would have loved to get out and see that. So hopefully things will, fingers crossed, things will start to loosen up a little bit more, and there'll be more of these in-person things where we can all have one of these panel discussions sitting on a stage somewhere together and go out for drinks and really and have that more of that festival experience.
So have you been at an in-person screening yourself?
Yeah, there was one outside of Philadelphia. There was one here in the city. It actually was great because it was a theater that I've been going to since I was a kid. It's like a nice old theater. Yeah, there's been a few, and they've gotten good turnout, and they've been the one that was here in New York was packaged with 3 other shorts that they were all great, and the directors did a really good job of finding films that complemented each other and put those together. And yeah, it was just great to look around and see people's reaction, and they're having the response that I thought they were going to have at this moment, and oh crap, they're not having the response that I thought they were supposed to have. Whatever it is, that was really nice.
That's wonderful. Samantha, how about you answer?
Um, yeah, I'm really grateful that it's been selected and screened at several festivals since last summer. Um, Most of them have been online. One was in person, also in New York. Was yours at Doc NYC, Joe?
No,
Oh, because I was thinking of the packaging.
was yours?
Yes, I thought that might have been the case because they package, I know, films
No, I
together.
mean, the Doc NYC is a great festival. No, we were in the New York Shorts International
Awesome.
Festival, which the theater was on on down in the Village. But
Awesome.
no, Doc NYC is a great festival. That's awesome
Thank you.
that you're in that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm hoping that I've sent it to a few other festivals for this next year. It's more expensive than I ever thought. That's another piece of advice for emerging filmmakers, is I was definitely surprised about the cost of the festival circuit. So trying to be conscientious of where I think my film would be a good fit, and where I hope it could find a home. And so now I'm thinking to like long term wise where it could find its long term home outside the festival circuit, but we'll see depending on some of these future festivals where it might get in. But I'm really grateful that it's been able to be screened and also to be able to join moments like this. And even though we aren't in person, it's still really awesome to get to connect with other filmmakers around the country, around the world. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully for future festivals when those could also be in person because yeah, there is nothing quite like that.
Definitely. Yeah, we try really hard to recreate as much of, the key things that are key to our festival. I just said key twice, but you know what I mean. So like we have our virtual lounge or our filmmaker lounge is virtual through the Discord platform. So I've seen a few of you guys in there already. So please join that if you're not in there. And for anyone listening, you can just go to damnshortfilm.org under 2022 festival on the drop down menu. You'll find our virtual filmmaker lounge and make an account and, you know, um, connect with people through that. Carl, have you had a chance to screen this film anywhere else?
So yes, but because it was made through the pandemic, it's only been screened virtually. Like I have not seen it on the big screen, and I would love to. I think we've screened at Heartland, New Filmmakers LA, the East Coast Disability Film Challenge. Because we were a finalist, we also got into like the Portland Film Festival. So we had some really awesome festival screenings for the film, but again, just all virtual. So I think what Samantha was saying, like, yeah, getting to connect with filmmakers from all over the world, right, or from all over the country, wherever, there's definitely a benefit to a virtual film festival when you can't have one in person. But I really do like the festival experience. Actually, you know what? I just realized there was one in-person screening in Boston last October, but I was moving my mom out of her house and cleaning up a bunch of stuff, so I'd completely spaced out on remembering that thing because I had too much other stuff going on. So, but that was the one time I saw it. And it was this awesome theater in right outside of Cambridge. That was really cool in Arlington. But that was, I want to say there were like 5 people in the theater and 4 of them were my family. And it was it was awesome to see it, but again, no audience because of pandemic.
Right. Yeah. Well, and we hope that all these things we've learned, or that we've been forced to do as a, not currently virtual festival can, we can take aspects of that, and once we return to in person, we can, still utilize things like our Discord server where we can connect and communicate on top of all the in-person networking and things like that. Patrick, have you had a chance to? How about you answer your own question?
Well, I'll start by saying that I agree with Samantha that I was really surprised when I started looking into festivals, just at, first of all, how many festivals there are, not only in the country, but around the world. And then the cost of submitting, it starts getting up there. You submit to 10 festivals, you're like, wow. And we've just started submitting at the end of last year. And we actually did some fundraising because we'd spent our whole budget to get to final cut. And so we did some fundraising to be able to submit to festivals. And our world premiere was 2 weeks ago at the Oregon Documentary Film Festival, which I think maybe Joe's film screened at too. It was out. They have an outside venue with it's almost like a drive-in. I wasn't able to go, but I got pictures of the film, being shown on this big drive-in screen. But I'm just grateful that we have the opportunity to get together to talk about our films. I'm looking forward to the season of film festivals. We've gotten some other laurels. That's another learning thing that I didn't know, that you can get an official laurel, but that may just be the first step. And if you're not named to have your film screened, you don't necessarily have it screened, but you have an official, acceptance. So a lot of those things are, again, part of that whole learning curve that we were talking about earlier, that you sort of learn as you go. But all of it's exciting, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it.
Can I add one small piece of advice? Because I took a whole film festival mastery class about submitting to film festivals for their early deadlines. Because when you submit for the early deadline, and on Film Freeway, there's like a drop-down menu where you can do like approaching deadlines, and then choose like early deadline. Because if you get in early, the cost is way less, right? It doesn't cost as much than it does as you get later. And as you get later, programs may have already been kind of formed based on those earlier submissions, right? So it really behooves you to go early, because they may form a program around your film, right? And so it I think can help keep the cost down, which is huge, because you're right, there's tons of festivals out there, and some can also be a little scammy. Right, you may get that laurel thing and not get screened. It's like, so like look at the reviews, look at that stuff. And Damn Short, I mean, I've been wanting to get into Damn Short for a long time, and I was excited to get in this year, but then because it was virtual, I was like, it's within driving distance of Los Angeles. I'm like, I could go. I actually could physically be there. But when you target festivals like that, it only helps you, right? It's like it I think can not break the bank and still get you into the festivals that you're targeting.
And I'll just jump back in and say I totally agree with that, and looking at the time frames and trying to get on early deadlines, and also realizing, which I didn't know at first, when you see something that it's the first year, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be an incredible festival, but those are the ones that you really have to do your research on. Because there's people are contacting me through Instagram and saying, please submit to our festival. And it's the first year, and you have to go, is this real? I can't send to every festival. And some of these ones that are just starting out are really just sort of collect as much money as possible. They sort of give as many people as possible official acceptance laurels, and then they really don't show any films. So you do have to sort of be careful if you're just starting out with some of those things. It's exciting, and I look forward to at some point, getting to see it in person with other people in a theater.
One day. But that's all we have time for today, unfortunately. I want to thank you all for the wonderful conversation we've had. And I would just like to quickly go around and have you tell people where they can find you, whether it's a social media handle or a website. And we'll start with Samantha.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to the other filmmakers. It was really nice to meet you all and hear about your experiences and advice. So I think the best way to reach me is probably my website. And I honestly was just trying to remember what it was. But it's my full name, SamanthaGraceSchulte.org is the place to find me. And feel free to reach out over email, LinkedIn, anything. .org, Squarespace is how I built that. But it would be great to connect with all of you further. And I can't wait to watch your films this weekend.
Awesome. Joe?
Yeah. So the Facebook page for the film is just facebook.com/Hello Sunshine Movie. The website is hellosunshine-film.com. But the Facebook page is great because that's where we update pretty regularly with screenings and announcements, and also just news and information about what's going on in Philadelphia, just to kind of raise awareness of the work that's being done out there. So yeah, I think, you know, Hello Sunshine Movie on Facebook is probably the best place, or Instagram, one or the other. And likewise, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing everyone's films as well. I'm kind of psyched for that.
Awesome. Carl.
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. Is always a great place to find me. I'm the Carl Hansen, all one string of characters about Carl Hansen. Facebook. I'm Instagram at fhansen1. So you can find me there. Is also another good way to get in touch with me. And then you can also see a lot of my other films on my team's website. We have a filmmaking team that we've been making these challenge films for quite some time, and it's culturaldetritus.com. And that's CULTURAL detritus DETRITUS.com. And we have most of our body of work on there.
Great. Pat, how about you?
You can find us on Instagram, Facebook. We also have a web page for the film, and if you just search in Google "Just a Broadway Baby," Mary Ellen Ashley, those things will come up. I think our handle on Instagram is Just a Broadway Baby _MEA, which are her initials. And there's also we got a great feature article in Playbill. So if you're somebody who likes to go to Playbill or knows about Playbill, they have some great links in the feature story about the film that would get you to some of those places. So.
Awesome. And we're at Damn Short Film on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and also youtube.com/Damn Short Film, which may be where you're watching this right now. And please join us tonight at 7 p.m. PST for the Q&A with some underground and horror filmmakers. I got that right. I had to go look that way. And then, yeah, thank you all so much for joining us, and you guys have a great rest of your day.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
Great meeting everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Whenever I'm with you, I am alright. There's something about the way you make me feel inside. I'm counting down the days till we fly away, heading to the sun, only you and me. Don't wanna waste another day being stuck here in this place.